Well, first I want to thank you for being willing to do this interview for this 50th anniversary project. And we go way back. I first met you in Arnie Wolf's extension class at UC Berkeley. So that was very early on. I met you, I met Susie Taylor, Don Moy, Jack Kennedy, all rolled into one class. And it was quite intimidating to be a beginner in the class, but I really enjoyed it. And that's when I just kept taking classes after Arnie's class. So I think that's where our first connection was Arnie Wolf's class. So I wanted to particularly get a chance to interview you because you were on the first Friends of Calligraphy Council with Don Moy and Nene Smith and Jack Kennedy. And how did that come about?
Well, I'm just looking at the notes that you as questions that you sent me. So I took a class mainly because I was just kind of bored at what I was doing at work to improve my handwriting. And that was with Sydney Warren in Livermore. Now, Jack Kennedy had already taken a class from her. And so I took Sid's first class, and Kennedy and I just kind of hit it off. We were somewhere around the same age. He was a little older than me. And so we both decided to take another class, but Sid just said that she kind of ran out of things to teach. So she gave us the book, Writing and Illuminating and Lettering.
A classic.
So Jack and I huddled in our own little corner, and we went through that book. And it was then that Donald showed up in the United States, and he was giving a class at UC Santa Cruz. Jack attended that class, and at that same time, Donald gave a lecture at UC Santa Cruz, and Jack convinced me that I should attend this lecture. And so Jack introduced me to Donald, and we went through the lecture, and some funny things happened during that lecture. And the following year, he gave a lecture at Stanford. So Jack and I both went, and we were sitting next to one another. And after Donald's lecture, he came up the aisle and he looked at Jack and he says, "Oh, hi, how are you doing, Jack?" And then he looked at me and he says, "Bill, right?" And I just dropped on the floor. I had no idea that he would remember me, but it was because of some of the funny things that happened during that lecture at UC Santa Cruz. So it was when Jack was in Santa Cruz that the idea of setting up a group like SSI, and when Jack came back, I think Georgiana must have attended one of those meetings. I wouldn't have known her from the Man on the Moon at the time. And so Jack approached me and he says, we're going to have a meeting about starting a group in the Bay Area, and why don't you come along?
Mhm.
And so I did, and it just went from there. So that's how I got involved. It was not by design. It was just because Jack was uh, had asked me to just come along because we'd become such good friends.
So how did that first meeting go?
Well, there's a lot of silly names um, that were suggested. Uh, the Society of something something, and it was just too much for the Bay Area. We were just
Mhm.
too relaxed because I was living in Livermore, and I had lived in Berkeley uh, on Grove Street, off of Grove on Berryman, near and not far from People's Park. After I got out of the Navy, and I was living with my grandmother,
Mhm.
and all the silly things that were going on in the Bay Area with the flower children and People's Park and hippies and all of that stuff, and the Haight-Ashbury, and um, yeah, all those names just didn't fit. And then Friends of Calligraphy was fortunately decided upon.
Mhm.
So,
And you took an official role in the calligraphy group. Did you
well,
on the council? How did that happen?
I
And do you remember meeting Don Moy at that time?
I don't I don't remember who was on that first council. Was
Mhm.
Don Moy on the council?
I think Don Moy was um, organizer of the meeting, and I think he did serve on the council with Nene Smith, and so you were part of that
Yeah,
official council. And then, of course, Don Moy took over the responsibility of writing a newsletter, because I know before that time, newsletters were from many groups were hand calligraphed and very informal, but Don Moy actually made it a very um, something that was very informative in the calligraphy world. His articles were so interesting, and I think that gave the Friends of Calligraphy a depth, a good foundation.
yeah. Well, I think at the time I was working at Kaiser in Pleasanton at the research center.
Uh-huh.
And part of my job there, I had been board drafting for Kaiser for um, maybe 10 years or more.
Mhm.
And I took the job at the CFT, which was the Center for Technology, because I could illustrate stuff.
Mhm.
Very juvenile, but I could illustrate stuff. And so they had a combined job position of draftsman and illustrator.
Uh-huh.
So I had access to all the cameras required for photographs and
Mhm.
half tones, and we had a print shop. And so I kind of, I think, got the position because I
Yeah.
could have crap printed for the Friends of Calligraphy.
Mhm.
And so for the first couple of years, that's what happened.
Uh-huh.
And I was printing the stapled newsletter and that sort of thing, and little handouts and other kinds of stuff. The company was pretty forgiving for the amount of stuff that we used.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that was it. I was never really a very good council member. I kind of shirked my duty, and it was kind of embarrassed by all of that. Yeah, it was all the way to the end, I guess.
We
But
all had to
anyway,
start. We had to start
yeah,
some.
so we got it. So we got to start. Yep.
Yeah, we got a good start. And look, it's 50 years later. So, to be in at the beginning was pretty
Yeah. Yeah.
great. And what are some of at the beginning, what were some of the workshops that you felt had an impact on you? I know you
Well,
mentioned Donald as
yeah, no,
being one of,
I didn't get a chance to do Donald's class until a lot later.
Mhm,
And but I had to go to Mount St. Mary's to do it, and I talked the company into paying my tuition
oh my gosh, that was that's a good.
because I told them I would learn a lot of things about page layout and this
Mhm,
kind of thing and that kind of thing, and I guess it kind of went over their head, and they agreed to pay the fees. So that's how I got into the first class in LA, and then I went back the following year on my own,
mhm,
and that's when Donald and I talked about him coming up to Oakland to the University at Oakland, and then
mhm,
and I was his connection between the friends and
mhm,
himself. But the second time I went down, I was kind of like a teacher's assistant. There
mhm,
were a few people that had been there before, but the first time I went down, we did a lot of the gilding and quill
mhm,
cutting
mhm,
and that sort of thing. I had skills,
mhm,
but I did not have tools. There were, I mean, it was frustrating because I could do calligraphy, but I didn't have the tools to go beyond doing A, B, and a C.
mhm.
Everybody else had been to universities. I mean, Thomas, for crying out loud, was an architectural or a landscape architect.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I kept wondering, how does this guy come up with this stuff? And then it was kind of, in sign painting is the same thing. I had the skills,
Mhm,
but then once I saw somebody, there was a guy that used to do a lot of work for UC Berkeley, to the sides of vans, of landscapes and spacescapes and all of this. And I asked him pointedly one day, I said, where did you go to school to learn uh, and take art? And
mhm.
he says, I went to the University of Texas, but I didn't pay any attention. And I told him, I swore at him vehemently that, yeah, he did learn something. And so it was then that I realized that in calligraphy, I was just spinning my wheels, and in sign painting, I was just faking my way through. So, um, yeah. And then when Donald went to the International Calligraphy Conference
Mhm,
in Wisconsin,
mhm.
he he helped me get a spot there doing sign painting for calligraphers.
Wow.
And so, being one of the teachers,
Mhm,
I wasn't very much involved with doing his um, his projects
mhm,
with the auditorium.
mhm.
You didn't go there, did you?
No, I didn't have a chance.
Well, it was like 400 people in this auditorium, and they're all on these tables radiating out from the um, stage that he was on, with a screen in the back. and he had one of these roaming microphones, and he would start talking and he was nowhere around, and he was kind of chuckling to himself behind the screen. But because I had been to the workshop in Mount St. Mary's, and then helping him uh, roaming the class with the gold leaf and the quill cutting and other kinds of stuff, and then because I had been his teaching assistant, quote unquote, in Oakland, I started roaming the back of the class, and I was kind of like his second voice. They knew, they found out that I had done all this, and so I was getting questions from each table, and so I would just kind of roam around and help everybody at their tables. So but after Sid, I took classes from Georgiana and then Arnie Wolf. I was at Paul Freeman's Boathouse workshop, which was funny because when I was at the picnic and Thomas asked me to fill in for him, Georgiana was at the Boathouse with Paul Freeman as well.
Yes.
And he had us do a little project where he could read anything we could write, and we were the object was to do letters over letters over letters over letters until you couldn't read it. And that, so the object was to make it so obliterated that he could not read it. Georgiana could not get two letters to even touch. And so that's kind of what I mentioned when we were at the picnic. I said, yeah, I remember Paul Freeman's workshop, and Georgiana just could not even get two lines to touch. But I really enjoyed Paul Freeman's workshop. And then I knew Sumner Stone, and I took a workshop from him. And then Thomas Ingmeyer did a workshop with a bookbinder. And I took that workshop. I took a couple other Roman letter workshops from Thomas as well. And then there was Dorothy Dean. Had you ever heard that name?
Yes, the brush artist.
Yes. So we were all at the boathouse. I think I was at the boathouse, and we were all there at the boathouse. And she comes through the door, and she's got this muumuu on with letters all over it. And she stands in the door with her fist on her hip, and she's got this, and this is a brush. And everybody just kind of looked at everybody else. And it was the break time on the first day. And I seriously wanted to learn how to do brush lettering. And Thomas was going to leave. I'm not sure who else was there, but everybody wanted to leave. And I said, oh God, don't leave me alone with this woman. So they all stuck around, and we kind of did 2 days, and we muddled through it. But I enjoyed it because just, and again, because I had the skills, I could see what she was doing with that paintbrush. And so I took her brush and I put a little piece of tape like a flag on top of the brush, and I told everybody, I said, now watch the top of the brush, don't look at the brush on the paper. And you could see her twirling from the serif down the stem, and then twirling again to get the foot. And so everybody started to see what she was doing. So
Well, you certainly had the experience of the brush.
I had not, no. I wanted to learn how to do it. That was my introduction to the brush.
Ah, and did that lead to your sign painting? Did that add to your sign painting?
Well, excuse me. Sign painting. Well, I had met Carl through calligraphy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met Carl in sign writing, and it was, or sign painting, depends on what side of the ocean you're on, whether it's sign writing or sign painting. Um, and see, he had the tools because he had taken graphic arts at College of the Redwoods up north.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just kind of flabbergasted by all of that. And yeah, he and I became good friends. He invited me to one of the first Letterheads meetings in Moore, Oklahoma. And I met all the bigwigs that were there, teachers. There's one of the few sign writing formal classes,
Mm-hmm.
like here in Australia. There's a school called what is anyway. It's a curriculum provided by Australia
Mm-hmm.
that covers many things: chefing, sign writing, stone carving,
Mm-hmm.
um, carpentry, auto body. It's like the biggest trade school system that you've ever heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I got involved with sign painters here in Australia. And a lot of the people that I have met were, in fact, instructors
Mm-hmm.
in the sign trade part of the system. And the sign writers here in this country are just the most fantastic brush people that I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Ever seen. Now, I took a workshop here in calligraphy, and it was so basic, but there are other organizations here in Australia as well that that are just they're just very talented people,
Mm-hmm.
but they have the tools. Most of them have been to some kind of graphic arts or other kind, something that relates to it, like like landscape architecture. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you take. If you're being taught this space, color,
Mm-hmm.
layer, foreground, background, midground, if you're taught all of that,
Mm-hmm.
there's no telling what a person can do with calligraphy. So anyway,
Well, it's fun it's fun getting the perspective, of a West Coast person and then having your experience in Australia, having had your foot in two places.
well, like most Americans, I've been away from the United States for as long as you've been up there
Mm-hmm.
in Oregon. Looking at the United States from the outside, I shake my head. I really do shake my head at what goes on over there. And like most Americans that go anywhere, hey, I'm an American. And I came over here with that same attitude and found out that most Americans are so into themselves. They don't know what's outside of those four edges of the United States. And I came over here thinking that I would just bust into sign writing. And it was the last thing I could do. I worked in sign writing. The first job I had was outside sales, but unfortunately, the guy that was the designer was a young lad during Vietnam, and all he remembers are all of these Americans that came over to Australia for R&R, and his opinion of Americans was probably I don't know how low you can get. And that cost me my job because he just didn't like to work with an American. So he did everything he could to torpedo me out of the water. So, but I worked in because I had done so much mechanical design with Kaiser. I worked in a couple of shops and ran routing tables and letter benders and other kinds of machines that most people couldn't really figure out, or they couldn't think outside the box to get things to work. So I did that for a while, and then I worked as a draftsman for a number of years, and that's the last job I had was doing drafting for a small machine shop that did the most amazing work. So anyway, next question.
Next question. Oh, well, I am sorry that I missed you when you came to the last picnic. I think it was in honor of Georgiana.
Yeah, it was.
Was that the last gathering that you met some of the Friends of Calligraphy group?
Yeah, that's yes, it was. I had Thomas and I go way back.
Yeah.
And so when I was there, I took a day and I went over to San Francisco and met him and his partner.
Do
you know her? Yeah,
Yeah.
she was still recovering from her injuries at
Yeah.
that time. So he looked at me and he says, I can't get to this picnic. Would you go instead and say something about Georgiana? And then I related the story about Paul Freeman.
Oh.
And Alan was there. So I have a wonderful picture of Alan in the yellow shorts with green socks and you know, in all of his splendor, and it was really good to see him.
Yes.
Yeah, Alan was one of my favorite people with from inside the Friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good, but I even had a GPS on the doggone. I was using my son's car, and I punched in the thing, and it just took me to the weirdest places. But I had this random piece of paper with the old picnic on it. And I finally got there and most of the food was gone,
Oh.
but yeah, it was good to see everybody, but
Yeah, well, I'm glad you got to renew some of those friendships.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, then when I opened my little speech by saying, well, I told my wife I was going to say, "G'day, mate. How you going?" And of course, it went over everybody's head. Yeah, Annie told me it would, and it did.
Uh-huh.
But I was trying to put on my best Aussie imitation.
Yes.
It didn't make any sense to them.
Oh, well, I appreciate you sharing all those stories. It's especially with the challenges we have trying to find a compatible time with your Aussie time zone and
Yeah.
my Oregon time zone, but it worked. And so,
Well, now when I looked at the last email, it said 10 a.m. here.
uh-huh.
And I just happened to go on to, I was looking at other stuff and I happened to go on to the email and it said, join us now. And I thought, oh, what the?
Well, we
It was
made
only 8:30.
we were able to make it happen.
Yeah.
Well,
What
this is
time is it there right now?
we are going close to 5 o'clock. So it's my dinner time
Okay. Because it's 10 to 10 a.m. here.
and you're having brunch.
They already had breakfast. So
Uh,
it's Tuesday.
we are Monday.
Yes.
But we
So when you told me it would be the meeting would be on Monday,
right.
I was here on Monday, but it was Sunday.
I see.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting the idea of how our time zones work. Well, thanks
Well,
again, Bill.
and
I really appreciate you sharing
yeah,
so much.
Annie and I had the same problem with the time zones because I would rush home to get onto the internet so we could chat. And then she would rush home to get on the internet so we could chat before I was going to work and after she was good. So, and then one day when she had come over and I introduced her to artichokes,
Mhm.
and the phone rang at 1 o'clock in the morning,
Uh-oh.
and she says, "How do you cook an artichoke?" And I thought, well, what time is it? It was, yeah, so even
Well,
we got confused.
you overcame the challenges, so it's a happy.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you, Bill, and I look forward to staying in touch now that we've reconnected by email, by text, by Zoom. We should
Now, I
to make,
tried I tried sending you an SMS
uh-huh,
and it wouldn't go through.
yeah,
And I don't know, because I send my son, my daughter,
uh-huh.
and a few other people SMSs, but we had all been on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't know if there's some kind of a link there. Are you on WhatsApp at all?
Occasionally. So we'll figure it out. This seems to work, and now I have your text. We can arrange something
Yeah,
and
something.
stay in touch. Well, I appreciate it so much, and so we'll add this to the archives. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Chris, you want to?
Yeah.
Push
up the upper right.
Okay, I think I stopped the recording, right? It's
No, still
No.
recording.
okay.